Welcome, Liberty Lunch people. It's 1 o'clock in Eastern United States. It's different time, so good afternoon, good morning. You're somewhere around the world. Good evening. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Liberty Lunch Power Hour. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the executive director of the People for Liberty. We're a group of people who believe the world can be freer and want to help us in our actions make it that way. So one of the important things about being free is accepting that there's a lot of things that we, the people, can do for ourselves. And there's no better example of that than a volunteer fire department. Most people in the Liberty movement know that 75% of the fire departments in the United States are volunteer fire departments. However, when you say that to somebody else, they're like, oh, but that can't be true because firefighting is dangerous and it's big and it requires a lot of people. But as it turns out, volunteers are able to do that. And we're lucky today to have an expert. I have Captain Berger from the Warren Volunteer Fire Department. Captain Berger, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So first of all, let's talk a little background. Where is Warren, New Hampshire?
We're on the western side of the White Mountains in the middle of nowhere. It's a little town with about 600 people. And it's a very hands-on town. This is one of those places where pretty much everybody's pretty handy and pretty rugged.
Right. So here we
middle
are.
Of nowhere.
It's almost hard to see, but for people who have their screen blown up, that's Portland, Maine, off in the right-hand corner, and Lebanon down south. So yeah, no, I don't want to say middle of nowhere, but essentially the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire, halfway to Canada.
Yes. Yep.
So you said 600 people in your town?
800 people that live here year round. In the summer, we have more people, tourists and things that come through and campers, but it's a small town.
And so one of the things about having a town that small is that if you were going to maintain a full-time fire department, you probably have to, I don't know, how large would that fire department have to be?
Well, I can't speak to how large it would have to be. I mean, we don't need one, truth be told. We have a volunteer fire department in our town. We have about 12 volunteer firefighters on at any particular time. People come and people go. But we're able to manage the fire needs of our town with the 12 people we have on our department.
So to that end too, everybody's volunteers. You know, one of the crippling things right now that's happening in a lot of cities is they are managing debt from pension. So the town that I used to live in, Beverly, Massachusetts, has 4 fire chiefs who they're paying out pensions to right now. And it's an enormous burden on the city. I'm guessing, even though you're the captain of the fire department, there's no pension lined up for you.
Well, no, there's no pension. And to be clear, captain is kind of a mid-rank position on fire departments.
Interesting.
Yeah, not that we have the chiefs are the ones that run the fire departments. I'm in middle management effectively. Captain means that I have a fire truck that's my truck that I'm assigned to, that I manage the crew on that particular truck, whoever comes with me. I'm in charge of them, and I'm in charge of maintaining that equipment and making sure it's always ready to go. So I'm not the chief. I don't run the whole fire department myself.
Got you. So you run a truck. Can you tell me a little bit about that truck itself? Is it like one of the big ones? It's a fire engine.
No, yeah, it's an engine, which means that it has a tank of water in it, and we can pump water. We have 1,000 gallons on the truck, and we go somewhere, and the first thing we do is we get that pump running, and we get ready to pump water off of that truck. So somebody goes and they go in to fight the fire. They pull the line and we feed the fire. We feed the hoses from that truck. When additional fire trucks come in, we hook them into that engine and We have tankers that come in, and we have other engines that come in and feed water into my truck, and then so that we can fight the fire.
Interesting.
So it's what you see as a classic fire truck is kind of what.
Gotcha. So so it's not. You guys probably don't have any high-rise buildings in Warren, New Hampshire. You don't need a big ladder truck or anything like that.
We don't have a ladder truck, but kind of perhaps jumping ahead, one of the big things with volunteer fire departments, one of the reasons why volunteer fire departments can work is we set up mutual aid networks. And so we have all of the fire departments around us are available to us when we have a problem. And when there's actually a real fire, something we can't handle, we immediately get these other fire departments on their way, and they come and they back us up. So we do have a ladder truck that will come from, there's a couple of different ladder trucks in the area, but from Plymouth, New Hampshire, we can call on them if we did need one.
Yep.
Most of the buildings are fairly low in Warren, so we don't really need a big ladder, but it's available to us because we all help each other out.
And so I guess that mutual aid means that you have probably gone to many calls outside of Warren.
Yeah, most of the calls are outside of Warren.
I hope so, actually, in a town of 800 people.
Well, yeah, it's the next town over is Wentworth, and we help out Wentworth, and they help us out. So we're on the run cards for both towns. So when they have a problem, they immediately call us, and when they have a problem, and when we have a problem, we immediately call them. So they're automatically on the way. So we help each other out. But then we call additional towns, Romney and Plymouth and Haverhill and all the towns around us, and they'll call on us when they need us. When they have a little tiny fire and they can handle it themselves, or if it's a car accident or any number of other smaller incidents. We can, they don't necessarily need us, but on the bigger calls, when you have a first alarm, second alarm, third alarm, fourth alarm fire, you get all of the towns. And we're lucky to be dispatched through a dispatch center called Lakes Region Mutual Dispatch, Mutual Fire Aid. And they represent about 40 communities that are part of our immediate mutual aid network. So there's a lot of people that can help us out. Some of those departments are paid.
Right.
But most of them are volunteers.
And so that leads me to sort of the next question is that, when you're talking about firefighting, you're talking about driving, those are sort of traditional roles that I think of for firefighters. But when you talk about dispatch, radio, communication, stuff like that, there's probably a lot of places for somebody who wouldn't think, oh, I'm ready to run into a burning building, but to actually help out and be a volunteer in a volunteer fire department.
Well, there's so much that people can do because it's not all. Most of it is not running into burning buildings. There have been very few calls. I've been on the fire department for 4.5 years, and I've been in relatively few, probably 12 or so buildings that were on fire. But most of the calls, there's car accidents, there's outside fires that you don't need to go running into a burning building. We have flooding, we do rescues. All kinds of different things happen that the fire department gets called for when people get locked in a house and need help to get out, which has happened.
I have to ask, how does somebody get locked in a house?
Ice.
Ice. All right. See, I didn't know that being a New Englander, but I didn't think of that.
There's a lot of different ways people can get themselves in trouble, or when they're locked out and they just have no idea how to get in. We've helped break into people's houses.
And I have to ask, have you done the traditional cat in a tree call?
We have had those kinds of calls. Yes, horses that are trapped, cats that are We've had, but not everybody needs to be the one that runs into the burning building. I mean, we need people to help direct traffic. We need people that can drive a truck. We need people that can operate the trucks. We need people that can look out for safety and look for anything that could be a hazard, or just keeping track of the people. We have this accountability system where we make sure that all of the firefighters are always accounted for, so people don't get trapped inside a burning building. We know where everybody is. There's a lot of jobs that anybody can do, and I happen to be pretty handy, so I jumped right in, and I took Fire One, which is the basic firefighter training that every real firefighter takes, and but not everybody has to do that. You could just stand in direct traffic, and that's a huge help.
Who provides that training? You said you took Fire One.
That was with the New Hampshire Fire Academy.
Gotcha.
Did that, but there are other organizations that do that, and fire departments run it themselves.
Right.
There are classes all over the place. My fire department sent me to the New Hampshire Fire Academy to do that training, and it basically makes me a real firefighter. Just like, I mean, I don't have the experience that the New York Fire Department has, but it's the same basic training.
Sure. I mean, essentially, if you have Fire One certification, you could apply for a fire department job somewhere else. That's what they would be looking for.
Yep.
So,
one of the things.
And that encompasses a lot of stuff, right? I must imagine that there's, pretty significant first aid capacity there in that, you do back in my day, it was ABC, airway, breathing, circulation, and all those things to assess a person in the beginning. You have to do a lot of that stuff too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, the Fire One trained us on the basic medical stuff. I'm not an EMT.
Right.
My department actually doesn't do ambulance calls, but we need to be CPR certified. We need to do basic trauma stuff. They train us on that. They spend a lot of time training us on how to rescue yourself when you get into trouble. There's a lot of different training that that goes on in Fire One.
Well, it's fascinating. I had forgotten this until right now, but I have a friend who is a firefighter, and but he had started off as a forest firefighter, and like they would parachute him into, and he said that the very first 2 days of training was how to protect yourself when you're in the middle of a forest fire. And I'm like, that seems like a really important thing to know.
Yep, we had a whole module in the Fire One that's all dedicated to wildland fires. The kind of stuff you see out west. We don't really have those here, luckily. Right.
Yeah.
But that's part of the training too. But not everybody has to do that training. You don't necessarily. We do constant recurrent training in our fire department in-house. So we're constantly training on our equipment, getting it out, using it, familiarizing ourselves with it, doing all kinds of mock scenarios and things.
So let's talk a little bit about the underlying mechanics. The truck, your truck. I'm guessing that Warren bought that. Did volunteers pay for it? How did your truck come to be?
Well, unfortunately, in this world, we are funded with taxpayer money. Right. Ideally, it would be volunteer. It would be all fundraised. But yes, there are taxes in our town, and our town raises about $25,000 or $30,000 a year to fund our fire department for equipment and such.
Right, which is a huge bargain because they're getting all the labor. No insurance.
They're getting all the labor. Right. If in a world without coercive taxes, it would be easier to raise money for fire trucks privately. If somebody's not having to pay 40% a year in taxes, then.
Yep. No, it's clear. And, I am, I'm a libertarian, of course, but, I recognize the fact that the world we lived in isn't necessarily set up for libertopia on day one.
But this helps. This is me putting where my body where my mouth is. I believe in voluntary solutions to problems, and everybody goes to how is the fire department going to work? How's the police department going to work in a perfect libertarian society? And we can prove that it works between volunteer fire departments and mutual aid networks. We don't need to have a paid fire department. You don't need to have a paid police department or any of it. You don't need it.
So somebody texted me this. Is this your station?
Yes. Yep.
That's awesome. So it's
and half of that's the town offices too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because let me ask you this. I'm guessing you guys don't. It's not like because it's a volunteer fire department, you don't live at the station when you're on call.
No. I have a radio, and everybody in our department is on call 24/7. which means we have radios or pagers. And when they go off, we have lives, we have other jobs. I own a small store in town. And we're doing all kinds of things, or we're dealing with kids, or all the different life stuff. And so we don't necessarily respond to every call, but our pagers go off, and if we can go, we do. And we respond to the fire station. We put on our gear and hop in the trucks, or sometimes we go directly to the scene. It depends on the kind of call.
Right.
And we go from there. So nobody's at the fire station on any given day.
Gotcha. And so I would imagine you, as a captain with a truck, if the truck's going to be required, obviously you've got to go to the station first. Do you get a feeling of like, who all's responded, who's going to be there, anything like that? Or is it sort of when you get to the scene?
It used to be when we get to the scene. I know the other towns are coming too.
Right.
When based on over the radio, I can hear which towns are being paged, and so I know roughly who's coming. I know who's in town on any given day usually. But we just actually about a year ago, I think, we got our first cell tower in town, and we actually have cell service now. We're moving into the modern age.
Wait, so you guys did not have cell service until last year?
We did not have cell service until last year. So we recently we were finally able to join the modern age, and we have a little app on our phones called Active 911 that so we get the page over our radio. We also get a page on our phone, and if the people click the little responding button on the app when they're responding, we know who's coming.
That must be a huge change for you guys, because I can imagine that in the beginning, if you didn't know, you might get 10 people showing up for something that really only needs 3 people.
Well, we still want the 10 people to show up anyway, because things can go bad in a hurry. But we'd rather people show up and send them away. And likewise, in the nearby town, we'd rather them call us and we get on the road, and then they turn us around while we're on our way to the fire or to the scene. We'd rather have that than have them get into trouble and need us and not have us on our way.
So that ties back to this thing that nobody should ever think to themselves, you know what, they've probably got enough volunteers, they don't need me.
Unfortunately, this it's a sad state today that volunteership is declining. And every volunteer fire department, and there are a lot of combination departments that have both paid firefighters and volunteers. They all need help. I'm sure there are some out there that have plenty of help, but every volunteer fire department I know wants help. Sure. And it's really easy to get involved with it. You just go talk to them, and they'll bring you in, and they'll teach you what you need to know. You don't need to know. You don't need to be a master of anything in order to join. You really don't.
So then the training, the fact that they're willing to train you up is awesome. How much of a commitment is that? How much of a commitment is the training? And I imagine it varies from job to job, but
the real training, fire level 1, is a serious commitment. I mean, I did it on nights and weekends, and it took a few months, but a couple hundred hours. It's not huge,
right?
But most volunteers don't actually even take level 1. Most are just trained in house. Yeah, so we train. We basically have, when you join our fire department, you have you're committing to about 4 hours a month,
right?
As sort of a bare minimum of between the training and the meetings and things. You don't need to have this big commitment of hundreds of hours and giving up your nights and your weekends for 3 months.
Right. Well, and so like, for example, for me, or, there are a lot of people who are watching this who, I can sort of see, who go to libertarian events or liberty events over the weekend, something like that. Is that something you should say, well, you know what, I probably shouldn't commit because, 2 weekends I'm doing this, or something like that?
You can always participate. They're looking for people. I mean, you don't know what hours you work compared to what the other people in the department work. You don't know when your leisure activities are compared to everybody else's. We have a lot of people that work outside of town. So on the weekends, we actually have better coverage than we do during the
Right.
weekdays. So we need more people that are working at home or working around town. Where, if people go do stuff on the weekends, then they don't show up to calls, but you show up when you can.
So it seems to me like this is something that actually the liberty movement really should be emphasizing. Hey, look, this is a great example of how people can get involved. And, so speaking for me, People for Liberty, I want to put this out there at the highest level and say, hey, look, if you're in the liberty movement and there's a volunteer fire department around you, and unless you live in a major city, right, there probably is a volunteer fire department near you.
It probably is. 75% of us are volunteers.
So I think that this should be a real point of emphasis. And we're going to do it. People for Liberty is going to commit to trying to really do a volunteer firefighter drive and get things out there. We
Awesome.
have coming up May 1st is National Libertarian Day of Service. I think that's a great thing. May 1st can be the day that everybody goes out there and tries to contact their local volunteer fire department, because I'm willing to guess that everybody who's willing to give their time, it's a pretty nice bunch of people who are out there doing it. By definition, they're into voluntarism.
Yeah, I mean, they believe in it, and they believe in helping people. And
Right.
I've met a number of libertarian or libertarian-leaning volunteer firefighters, certainly. But there's a million things you can do. So people should, if you have any interest at all, go and talk to your local fire departments.
That sounds great. Now, I'm guessing too, though, that there is probably an opportunity for people to put money into volunteer fire departments as well.
Oh, of course. Volunteer fire departments, they have all kinds of fundraisers to raise money for their. And they're not raising money for a truck more often than not, but
Right.
but they're raising money for all kinds of other things. And we have, we were doing different fundraisers, cooking burgers and things to raise money. Some people do bake sales and plant sales and all kinds of things to
Yeah.
raise money for equipment that they want that they can't fit in the budget.
Well, so one of the things that somebody was telling me about is that the suits are actually, people don't understand how technically complicated the suits are. It's not just a big, heavy jacket, and they save lives all over the place. And allowing a department to have backup suits, multiple suits, stuff like that is a huge deal.
I wish I did. The gear costs, a set of fire gear costs about, $2,500 or so,
right,
with the jacket and pants and boots. And once you go into a fire, there's all that, or anything you do, they get filthy dirty. They get filthy dirty, and it takes a day to dry them. Once you wash them, it takes a day to dry them. And so if we go to one call and then we wash our gear, because it's all these carcinogens and everything, it's really important to wash the gear.
Sure.
Then we're sort of out of service temporarily. If we only have one set of gear. In our department, we can only afford to have one set. But there's a lot of things that we wish we had. But
right.
Make do with what you got.
So that's a great point. So we want people to take the plunge and get in there and find out how they can volunteer. But if you think, you know what, maybe that's not for me, there is an opportunity to contribute voluntarily and make your volunteer fire department, help those volunteers who are out there, make their jobs safer.
Yep. Or, the other thing that some people do, there are fire department auxiliary departments that are basically are sort of the cheerleaders for the local fire departments. They help out. They bring sandwiches to the fires. They bring coffee in the middle of the night to the whatever the scene is, when all these people are tired and miserable and it's wet and cold, and you get a cup of coffee brought to you that people,
yeah, I can imagine.
It's amazing. Deal. And that in and of itself is a huge help. So if you see that there's a fire down the street, go to the local Dunkin' Donuts and get a cup of Joe and bring it over to them. That can be a big help too.
That is an awesome suggestion. So just as we're going to wrap up a little bit, people should go to the volunteer fire department and they can get as involved as they want to.
Yep.
right? If they want to really get in there and they want to, if they want to be that person who is going into the burning building, responding to those scenes, the volunteer fire department has the ability to get you trained, to point you in the right direction so that you can do that. If what you want to do is, something that's a little more peripheral, there's certainly options for that. There's the auxiliary that you talked about that, the thing you need to do is support them. And I would imagine the auxiliaries also do fundraising for the fire department.
They help. Oh, yes, absolutely.
And so there's all those opportunities. And, those are things that I think libertarians have a lot of experience with. And then, the benefit that I think people might not be thinking about is that you're now really involved in your community.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a great thing for, I think, people who want to, be part of the liberty movement, to get out there and see the community actually functioning, the volunteer part of it. And, it's one of the things that we talk about a lot of times is there's a lot of libertarians who suddenly say, oh, you know what? I want to run for mayor, or I want to, something just out of the blue. And we say, well, maybe it's better if you got a little involved in what's happening in your town. You could go to PTA meetings or city council meetings, or be in the volunteer fire department.
Yep. I got to tell you, though, this is like one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I wish I did it when I was in my 20s rather than when I was in my late 40s.
Yeah.
But you can do it if you're old, if you're young. It really has brought me more into the community than I was before. Certainly. Now I know a lot, know the people, and they know me and they respect me.
That's awesome. Well, so you've done a wonderful job representing what it means to be a volunteer fire department. I think people can see. And just quickly too, so you're a captain now. You said you've been in for 4 years.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your progression? I guess you don't start a captain.
No, I started out a firefighter, well, not even a firefighter, when I joined, but I did get the training right off, the fire one. And that's a big deal. That's a commitment, especially when you have life going on all around you. And we have 12 people. So we have a couple of captains, because we have a couple of trucks, and we have, when it's in the middle of the night and, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and the radio goes off and you go to the fire station and you show up and there's 3 people there, 3 people, that one more person that shows up is a big deal. And I was that person that was showing up. I was the person that was showing up at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning when it was raining out, when it was cold and miserable out. And so I kind of just moved up the ranks. It's just who shows up.
Chad mentions too that an entity somebody who's not carrying a gun is actually somebody who, is always welcome in the community. And so when you guys show up, people are always thrilled to see you.
Yeah. Well, I show up on the worst days of people's lives. Sure. And so they're pretty miserable. When I show up, they're pretty miserable. It's not a good day for them.
Right.
But they are happy that we show up and
right.
We have, we save their property when we can.
Yeah. But whatever it is, you came to help.
Yes.
And that's, that's an important thing. All right. Well, so Captain Berger, thank you so much for
thank you.
being here with us on People for Liberty Lunch. I'm going to do what I can to make this a point of emphasis. I think the liberty movement across the board, people should be joining volunteer fire departments where they can, because it's an easy way to get into the community, which is what we need to do. But it's also an easy way to show voluntarism works. And it does. The country hasn't burned down.
Nope, not yet.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And maybe I'll see you at the New Hampshire Libertarian Party convention next year. Or do you ever go to Pork Fest?
I do.
All right. Well, maybe I'll see you at Pork Fest.
All right.
It's on my maybe list if I can make it this year.
All right.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.